When I'm working on putting assignments together, especially when I'm working on doing my template assignments, I like to do my template assignments with a template rubric. I typically will use similar but not identical rubrics across my course that are tied to my learning objectives. So in this course, one of the things I'm trying to do is to provide a good example of how you can use discussion boards. And it's important to students to know what they're being graded on. In fact, it's a really good idea before their first discussion assignment or in a link from their first discussion assignment to go over your rubric. And I like to do that using a video. But when I'm writing them, I tie my rubric to outcomes and it makes it way easier to build them. I sometimes struggle with coming up with a good way to measure student work. And so when I was looking for discussion rubrics, I went out and looked for sample discussion rubrics, and this was the one that I like best. And I like to give credit to where it is due. And when you get to the rubric section, you'll see there's an actual link to it. But this is from Purdue, and I love Purdue. I use their resources for lots of different things. But I think this is a really good way to look at rubrics, and I really think that it gives you an idea of where and I like the criteria good, fair, poor. Let's show you how that works in Canvas. And I don't always do exactly like this, but I think that it is a good thing. And so one of the things that I struggle for my students is to teach them professionalism. And so one of the things I'm looking for in my rubrics is professional communication. I'm trying to come up with the ideal terminology, but I think that responsiveness, timeliness, and I'm going to call it responsiveness. And that's something that I may change and work on so that it's really clear to the students. But what I'm looking for is, does the student actually, we could change this to participation. Participate in a meaningful way over multiple days during the week. And I really, especially in my area, I really struggle with discussions. I don't use them in all of my classes because I don't want students in programming to, per se, talk about programming. I want them to program. But I do encourage them to have ungraded discussions. And if somebody is asking questions and I record a video on how to solve that, I'll typically send it out to all the students. But I typically start building my rubrics by building outcomes. And so here, I don't always use these, but we can do it this way. Excellent, good, fair, poor. Those are, I mean, you're looking at sort of A, B, C. So what you do and what you want to do, you can, I'm going to make some changes here. I'm going to take you to one that I've got done. So I'm going to save this. And, oh, friendly name. We'll do that too. Participation. Okay, now I can save it. And I personally typically use the highest score when I'm evaluating things, and these things can come out at the end where I can really evaluate through outcomes and do reports and see how they turn up. And I can manage my rubrics here too. So this is, I do exceeds expectations and I spell it out. Meets expectations and I spell it out. So I am sort of using those. And so for exceeds expectations, and I usually use a 5-point scale on these. So I can edit this. And I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to sort of look at what I'm looking for here for participation. And so I'm going to consider the participation, sort of the timeliness, quantity, quality of discussions. And so for the expectations, participates, and spell check is awesome 3 or more times per week, is positive and encouraging and contributes to the discussion in a significant way. And what I'm looking for that is that I want them to, I don't want that a boy, good job, that sort of things. I want people to provide constructive feedback and constructive criticism. So meets expectations, I'm going to edit that one. Oh, I've got to hit edit here first. So for me, meeting expectations participates 2 or more times per week with meaningful replies to other students. And we could have one more here. And so here, meets expectations. I would include needs work, and we'd call that 2 points. Let me edit that again. Participates only on one day, or participation is shallow and doesn't provide and usually has not met all requirements. And that would typically be like a 1, and then 0 would be for somebody who did not participate. So that sort of gives me my options here. And you can choose where your mastery is at. So mastery for me is where it meets. I want to change this to 4. And yeah, I think I'm pretty good with that. So mastery at 4, meets expectations. So I'm going to save this. So now I'm going to start to build my rubric. And I really encourage you to build rubrics by starting from outcomes. And the outcomes should be tied to your syllabus. So I can create my discussion rubric, and there's one in here. And this is okay. This one comes in I'm just going to start fresh. It's okay. I want something more. I'm going to add a rubric. I'm going to do discussion, and I'm going to find my outcomes. So I'm going to choose critical thinking. I'm going to actually have to come back and add the other. I'm going to choose participation. And I'm going to import that. And then I can delete this one. And I could find another outcome, critical thinking. And this is when I got to fill out some more. Okay, and this is for a specific outcome that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to cancel that for right now, and I'm going to save this. But I would typically add in, you'll see I have 2 or 3 requirements for the rubric, but you can keep adding them by finding outcomes. And this makes it really easy to create a rubric that you can use and build rubrics from outcomes. So I usually start with outcomes first, then build my rubrics, and then I build my template assignments. But you don't have to do them in that order, because you could just go find your rubric afterwards. But it's a really good idea to start by defining your outcomes.